Well, good evening and welcome to this live stream event on the 7th of June 2022. Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics here. Great to have you on board. And we're going to have a very interesting conversation. We've got lots of information. I've got Edwin with me. He's done some work as well. Lots to talk about. And we'll hopefully get some of your questions in as well. And, want to use this as a chance for you to throw questions at Edwin and myself. And try and make sense of what's been going on over the last 24 hours with the RBA, etc., etc. As normal, I will just remind you of a couple of little things here. Just to say, for everybody's understanding, this isn't financial advice or legal advice or property advice. We're just having a general conversation. Please do play nice in the chat room. We do moderate the stream. And this is as of the 7th of June 2022, if you're watching in replay. Use that Walk the World to get my attention. If you want to ask a question, use that Walk the World and there's a chance to see it. I've also enabled Super Chat, and that means that you can get your question top of the list and also make a contribution to help us cover the costs of running this thing that we do every Tuesday plus. So that would be great if that would be something you'd like to do, then please use the Super Chat to either make a contribution or to get your question to the top of the list. Now, there were a couple of questions from earlier on, which I may just go back to before I bring Edwin in, simply because otherwise I'm going to lose them. With so many questions, the issue is they drop off after a while. Could my username become reality? Houses only go up? Debt and regret? Yes, that is a point. And thanks to Super Chat, house prices may go down as well as up. That's exactly right. We will see over the next little while precisely how this plays out. And there was another one, I think, a little earlier on, which I need to find if I can. Just bear with me a second, from Rick. Looking forward to tonight's show and TB on Friday. Yeah, TB is coming on Friday. Any chance you could do a chat with Francis Hunt, a.k.a. the Market Sniper? Don't know, Francis, but I'll look that out and see what we can find, and thank you very much for the Super Chat. Anyway, without further ado, let me press this button and Edwin, come in.
Martin.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm actually okay. A little bit cold, but we find ways of warming up. But it's going to get hot under the collar for good old Phil. But you tell me that there was a record number of viewers tonight. Dusty tells me it's actually the Phil Lowe's fan club that are actually watching us tonight, so we better be careful what we say.
Oh, I don't know. I've never been careful about what I say. I just say what I think and have done with it. But obviously, a very significant turn of events today with the RBA move, and I thought it might be good just to go through what he said, because some people may not have picked up yet what was actually said in the RBA conversation. So let me just put this up. So basically, they said, at the meeting today, the board decided to increase the cash rate by 50 basis points. They also increased the exchange settlement balance by 50 basis points. Inflation in Australia has increased significantly, while it's lower than in other advanced economies. That's because we measure it differently, and it's probably a bit later. Lower global factors, including COVID, but also some local capacity constraints. Inflation is expected to increase further. That's a very important comment there. But then decline back towards 2 to 3% next year. Good luck with that. Higher price of electricity and gas, petrol are all there. The supply side problems, they said, when they're resolved and commodity prices stabilise, even at a high level, inflation is expected to moderate. That's, of course, because it's the rate of change of things that actually drives inflation. Once they've stuck at a high level, if they don't go up anymore, that's less of an issue. The economy is resilient, growing by 0.8% in the quarter and 3.3% over the year. Households and business balance sheets are generally in good shape. Now, I think that's a bit of an optimistic status. Basically, from the SME surveys and from the household surveys, I have a different point of view. Upswing in business investments underway. Yeah, that's true in some areas. Macroeconomic policy settings are supportive of growth. Terms of trade at record high. And then they went on to say, labour market's also strong. Employment growth is significant. Unemployment at 3.9%. Again, we've argued about that before, of course. Source of uncertainty economy about household spending. particularly because of the increasing pressure. Interest rates are also increasing. Household prices are declining in some markets, but remain more than 25% above that they were in the pandemic. That's, of course, averaging. And the question will be about the level of household consumption ahead. They're looking also at the global outlook, which remains clouded, China, COVID, etc. And the increase in interest rates by the board is a further step to withdrawal of extraordinary measures. They're going to go doing more of the same, almost certainly. They expect further steps to be taken in the process of normalising monetary conditions. The sizing and timing of future interest rate increases will be guided by the incoming data and the board's assessment of the outlook for inflation and the labour market. They're committed to doing what is necessary to ensure that inflation in Australia returns to target over time. So there you have it. I have to say that I'm not totally impressed with that. It doesn't tell you very much at all. But Edwin, any observations from your end? What they said there?
Mate, all I can say is that Phil's got it in forever. It's a honeymoon period, and he's decided to go 50 points. I mean, he could have spread it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Go one a day, something like that. Like, I mean, seriously, it's I reckon he's on Albo's bad books. But it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the banks follow suit now. And I just want to, as we start, Mike, I just want to bring a point across that I shared on Twitter earlier on, and that is that with regard to an incident, albeit it's just one, and it's take it as hearsay, but it was just interesting nevertheless, and it sort of more or less lays the foundation to try and give us an understanding of what the banks are going to be doing in the future with valuations, with the way they consider or take account property values and instructions that they give to the valuers. So a client checks the CBA back-end property valuation on the mortgage calculator that they have apparently on the in the mortgages. I haven't got a mortgage with CBA, so I wouldn't know. Anyway, he's been checking regularly, and as of yesterday, the valuation, the proposed value of the property on that particular mortgage was $2,312,000 according to that calculator that they use. And he decided to check today at around 4 o'clock, he said, which is post the announcement. And lo and behold, the new valuation based on the calculator that they gave him on that house is $2,047,000. So, is it a coincidence? Is it another conspiracy that I'm going to hang my hat on, or is this the future of how banks are going to look at property immediately as the rates rise, and potentially future rises that Lowy alludes to in what you just read?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? And it's interesting. I've had a lot of intelligence now from the valuation sector, and they're all down valuing things like you wouldn't believe. The banks are actually winding back their income multiples, and they're trying to essentially push people out if they've got a situation where they are actually very severely exposed. Along the lines of, we don't have to foreclose on you, but you really should put your property in the market and get out while you can, because things are going to get more serious. So we have seen a very significant turning of the market. And the average borrowing power now of households, depending on which calculator you use and which lender you use, is down actually by between 8 and 15% from where it was 6 months ago.
Well, this is the situation where now the we're going to be talking about, no doubt, in the future as to what policies the Alba government are going to be bringing in order to subsidise, to assist, to help, whatever you want to use and say, what wording, and it's all semantics at the end of the day. It's just a gift by the government that they'll claw back from the taxpayers later on. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because it's going to get harder, in my view, for people to borrow and to get in the market, especially if you've only got a 5% and let's go with a 10% deposit. Yep. So all that that's going to be unraveling and unfolding, in my view, is how much harder currently things may change, but how much harder it currently is to get into the market, because the assessment that the banks are going to pull on applicants, I dare say they're going to be a lot harder. And as you say, Martin, as you and I have been talking about, and we have been criticised over and over again by a lot of the trolls on Twitter and on other social media platforms, and that is that, when I've said, and you sort of agreed to it, you backed me up on, and that is that valuers are under directions from the bank, directly or indirectly, because the banks pay the fees. The banks, it's to protect the bank mortgage, not the borrower. And if that wasn't the case, why do they need a contract of sale with reference to a purchase price in order to do the valuation? Because let's face it, valuers do a 4-year degree at university, so they should be able to assess and give you an assessment of the value of a property within 5%. Real estate agents have that assessment within 10% when we give a CMA, and you could come pretty damn close. It's not rocket science when you really look at it. But right now, the pressure that is on valuers and the mandates that is on valuers, and as their rates increase, in my view, things are going to get harder for those really wanting to come into the market. But there are other things that we're going to be looking at very closely moving forward, as these post this rate rise, as well as potential future rate rises before the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, Edwin, I've got a few people in the chat saying now prices will still go up. Well, let's touch on that in a moment or two. I might just share with you a few other little bits of intelligence, which I want because it's important to put this decision with regard to interest rates and inflation in context, right? And so here's a chart. This is the electricity futures. And you can see basically how much it shot up in just the last few days. In other words, higher fuel prices are coming through, and that's electricity. And we can look at also the EU gas price, which surged dramatically, and the gas price in Australia has also surged dramatically. So wherever you look, you're seeing significant momentum in terms of prices. And that I think has to say to us, inflation is more embedded than ever, a lot of people thought, and that the inflationary pressures are going to last for a lot longer. So it's not like we've sort of stepped over into a bit of a hiccup and now we're back to normal. This is a new normal where inflation is surging. And also, Roy Morgan's confidence index today for businesses was significantly down, maybe not surprising. And the consumer confidence also dropped as well. So we've actually got the situation where both consumer and business confidence is essentially pretty weak. Now, I think that's an important point to make here, because what it says is that we're in an economic environment where, on one hand, a lot of people are saying the economy is really strong, it's doing really, really well, and yet, on the other hand, it seems to me that there are lots of indicators that suggest that things are not quite as good. And the business sector, I'm particularly concerned about, Edwin, with the small businesses I'm involved with through my surveys. A lot of those have leases, and those leases have been frozen up until the end of June in New South Wales. They're about to be unfrozen. So there's a really interesting question there then about whether they can continue to trade or whether they will actually use that as the final exit for their business. This is not going to be a straightforward thing.
Look, no, and in relation to the rental market in the private sector, for the average household, rents are only going to increase moving forward as well, because the investors are just going to hike the rents. So until there are better policies, local government policies, state government policies, and the pressure really comes down on the states and on the local governments to really open up or release more land or allow medium density. I'm not talking about high density, but I'm talking about medium density developments, well thought out developments like we used to build in the 90s, early 2000s, where you've got your strata complexes of 6, 7, 10 villas or even townhouses, as opposed to these monstrosities that people think they build, but they can't really, and you end up with a big mess. So I'm talking about the medium density. So unless those screws are loosened, what we're ending up with is a real shortage of livable property. There's a lot of apartments that are vacant. There's a lot of apartments that are at hand. But who really wants to live in those dog boxes that you and I have been talking about? Mold infested, dog boxes that you can't swing the cat. I should really say you can't even swing a rat in it. So all these factors are obviously going to play out, and the cost of living is getting more and more expensive. With energy, petrol, fuel, which is going to increase the cost, the food. So those that have got a mortgage are going to be more going to move closer into, or going to get deeper into mortgage stress, which over the years will eventually turn into mortgage delinquency. And then, those stories will unfold, and we'll see those stories unfolding in a couple, 2 or 3 years. So there's a lot going to play out. I'm interested to see what the government's really going to do, and how quickly they are going to be exercising those incentives, or pulling those levers that you and I refer to, the stimuluses, to try and quench or try and buffer or support the property market on the one hand. You mentioned earlier on that some of the people are commenting there on I can't see the panel, the commentary panel. I can't see it on my screen, but that some are calling potential property rises. And that would be, in my view. I put out a tweet today, and I said we've got falling clearance rates, more properties on market than same week 2021. RBA hikes rates, elbows upset in China. And I'm calling a buyer's market for at least the next 6 months, and that's before the immigration lever gets pulled. And in my opinion, that immigration lever will get pulled in order to buffer the falls. But all I'm seeing, Martin, in the comments in the conversations that I'm having with different people across the board, with conveyancers, solicitors, accountants, my peers, my colleagues, and that is, it's just becoming harder and harder for the ones that haven't come into the market. It's just becoming harder and harder for them to come into the market, into the property market. And some say, interest rate hikes means properties are going to be dropping in value, and they're going to be dropping in value dramatically. Okay, let's call it a 15% drop. Let's call it a 25% drop. But for every $1 million, the 50 basis points represents $265 extra per month. So this is what I was going back and alluding earlier on, Martin, as to what are the banks going to do? Because now you've got to fork out. If you want that $1 million property, well, someone will say, that $1 million property is now worth, $750, so it's a lot less. But how is the bank going to assess your serviceability if we get a further increases of another 50 or 100 points? And we get to a point, and that's a question that I sent to you. When is that break even? When is that a point of no return? When it becomes a Japan? When do we become Japan?
So the point here is they still have to work at a 3% buffer, right? 3% buffer on the current mortgage interest rate. So what that essentially means is that already the buffer is a lot bigger than it was, because the interest rates have gone up, right? And that's before they then also fiddle with the debt to income ratio, which a number of have done as well. And then some are actually adding an extra buffer on as well now. So, like I said, 8 to 15% lower borrowing power now than we had 6 months ago is what I'm seeing. On average, it varies. There are some with bigger incomes and other assets. But that's enough to really change the trajectory of property prices. And sure, property prices for some people rose very significantly over the last couple of years, but not everybody. I still remind some people of North Ryde apartments that peaked in 2017 and haven't ever recovered. I mean, there are spot areas where prices are still not any higher. So I think we're going to see a consolidation at best, and at worst a considerable reduction in prices, at least in the short term. But then your question is exactly the right question: is at what point do they effectively think that the economy is broken, and then they need to turn turtle and then start stimulating again and providing the incentives and bringing in migrants, etc., etc.? That's the really unknown question. And to that answer, it fundamentally, to me, depends on to what extent the RBA is really going to try and stamp out inflation or not. And of course, the central banks around the world are all at the moment aggressively trying to get inflation under control. And so you'd expect the RBA to follow suit, because they always follow what everybody else is doing. They don't tend to lead. New Zealand's at 2%. The Fed is going to lift rates later on. New Zealand is, as I say, up. The UK is already up. So in a way, the trajectory is set for at least a period of time. So I think we're going to see considerable easing. And one other piece of information which may be relevant is this, and this is the 3-month credit aggregates, which came out quite recently. And what's interesting about this is that the housing credit growth is actually a little down. Owner occupation down was a little more. Investing was actually up a little. Now, I think that probably will change now, because I think investors will probably begin to walk away a little bit. And sure, personal credit up and down doesn't tell you much, and business investment was up at 2.8%. But the point there is that we're already seeing some early signs of credit growth easing back. And as I've said quite often, the rate of change of credit is actually the most fundamental lever in terms of price availability and price movement. So it seems to me that we're probably looking at a sideways or down. Now, I should just make a quick comment here also. I'll pick up this one. This was quite a good one. Chris Bates looks exactly like Edwin. It's uncanny. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Unfortunately, Chris Bates couldn't make it tonight. He's got health issues within his family, and they're at the hospital at the moment, so he wasn't able to join. And Edwin stepped in at the last moment, because I felt it was important to have somebody else on as well as myself to talk about this. So Edwin jumped in and said, yeah, he's happy to join. So Edwin, I really appreciate your willingness to come and pretend to be Chris.
Oh, look, I think he pretends to be me.
Yeah, could well actually. Yeah. Very good.
I can splash a male. I can splash a goatee or a beard if I really want to.
Excellent. Now, I think it's probably worth just exploring a few things to do with mortgage stress, because some people may not actually have picked up the mortgage stress story, and this is quite an important one. Remember that this stress from my models is before the most recent rises, so this is the end of May. So I thought I might just quickly recap. So this is the mortgage stress data. So basically, mortgage stress is now 43% of households, which is as high as it's ever been, and that's compared with 32% in February 2020. Rental stress has gone through the roof, so it's now 46.71%. That's very high, and it's actually overtaken now mortgage stress, which is a big concern. And the household debt to income ratio is still very high according to the RBA, so we're still borrowing more. And so the net result is not particularly pleasant. And here is the quick summary. So in terms of mortgage stress, 42.97% of households in mortgage stress, or 1.59 million households. And in rental stress, 46.7%, or 2.25. And without going into too much detail here, because I made a separate show about this the other day, it's worth noting that New South Wales and Victoria are leading the way, but Tasmania takes the prize, because Tasmania, of course, whilst it's a small state and a small number of people in mortgage stress, 42,000, it's a large proportion. And even South Australia is above the national average. On the rental stress side, interestingly, ACT and New South Wales are leading the rental stress. The story, of course, here, and it's worth thinking about for a second, is that we know we have a lot of people who are wrestling with stress. Now, when we measure stress, we talk about it in cash flow terms, money in, money out. So we're looking at the mortgage or the rent, but we're also looking at the other payments. Income has to come in and flow through and go out and cover, well, fuel, of course, gas, electricity, food, all the other essentials, the non-discretionary items, which has an inflation rate of well above 6% at the moment. So that's why I look at it holistically. And for the first time, I think now some journalists, and I've done 10 interviews today, I think I said, journalists have started to understand why I look at it this way, why I look at it in holistic, rounded terms, rather than just looking at the payment on the mortgage, because you've got to look at other things too. And that's, of course, is very, very significant, because it means that they're going to have less money to spend now. They're going to have to prioritise, and they have to try and figure out what to do. And like I say, some borrowers now having the bank whisper in their ear saying, well, maybe you should sell. And Edwin, we're just coming back to the listings question. Listings are way up, right? And one of the reasons I think listings are up is because the banks are actually just quietly encouraging people to sell now before they get worse later.
Look, definitely, as we said before, Martin, we've got a situation where we've got people, the SMEs that you and I have been talking about for a very, very long time. Even pre-COVID, we were talking about how the SMEs were struggling in 2019. More to the point was I was noting that 30 to 40% of the offices in my industry, which there's about 8,700 offices in New South Wales. That's real estate offices, registered real estate offices in New South Wales, and a number of offices that I'm acquainted with. And we're running on the second, even third credit card. So there was a lot of stress there. Then we noted the entertainment, as well as the small cafes and so forth in the city. When we went through the first lockdowns in the first wave in 2020, that was shut down and that were impacted a lot. Then towards the end of 2020, the government told them, oh yeah, everything's fine, we're all going to be 100%, and you just need to upgrade your shops, your takeaway shops, your restaurants, blah blah blah, to become COVID safe, COVID friendly, and so forth. And they did. And a lot of people that I know of spend anywhere between $60,000 to $120,000 to become, so-called COVID safe and COVID friendly. And they remortgaged their homes. They pulled equity down from their properties. Now, not only in the hospitality industry, but in a lot of other sectors as well. Clothing, fashion, and everything else. So they all spend a lot of money. And as you and I know, and Lindsay David talks about it a lot, is that how a lot of the small, the SME enterprises borrow a lot of money from the principal places of residence. So they, properties went up in value. They remortgaged, refinanced, and pulled a lot of equity down to keep going. And what did they get? They got a slap on the face. So there's a lot of stress. So these are the properties that the banks are, whispering in the owners' ears, saying, it would be easier for you it would be better for you to go on market, realise as much as possible without going through the pain of litigation, courts, and basically, we end up with mortgagee in possessions. But people have also got to understand that is a long process, and that is also a costly process for both sides, and they don't really want to lose out, because it just dwindles away the equity in the home that could potentially go to the owner of the property, after paying the bank down. But everything is so interwoven, Martin. Everything is so tied up with small businesses that unfortunately people have had to walk away with just given the proceeds to the bank, and agents are going to be fighting more and more to even keep the commission, because an agent is not a secured creditor, and if there's a shortfall on the property after the sale, if there's a shortfall on the balance sheets of the banks, well, that might get very, very hard for the agents to even keep the commission. So that's just a bit of an industry background there. But so what we're seeing, and as I've posted out, is what we're seeing are the numbers that are on market are very much, are very much the same as what they were last week. There's not a lot has happened. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 3 to 4 weeks post this call today. But they are relatively higher than the 2021 numbers. Interestingly, over the last 3 weeks, we've had a continued growth in listings on market, than any other winter. Generally, as we've said, that winter is the season where listing numbers pull back, but this one has really caught our attention, caught my associates, my colleagues' attention, just as much as myself and yourself. and that is that not only apartments have increased in volume for sale, but also homes. It's going to be interesting. But you and I've spoke about it before, and we've said those that wanted to test the market are certainly, in my opinion, they're going to be pulling the listings off market. But we've got those that want to sell, those that need to sell. Then you've got the next tier that have to sell, and then you've got the ones that must sell. Yep. So that's going to be for our followers. What I'm trying to get at in that is that it really is becoming more and more a buyer's market, and it's more and more of an opportunity that if you want to or have to come buy, you want to buy, and you can basically negotiate your terms more so than what you could 3 months ago. I've shown examples to yourself and to our followers and to our viewers over the rant as to how motivated some vendors have been of late, and motivation's only going to also determine how much the vendors are willing to walk away with less in their pocket. So a lot of things are going to be playing out, but yes, the numbers aren't coming down, and it's going to be a wait and see how much more. The only other thing that could happen, obviously, is that we could end up with those that don't have to, or that are in the position of have to or must sell. Anything below that, just I want to sell, or I think I need to sell because I want to downsize, or I'm an empty nester. They could also pull back the listings, and we could have a drop in listing numbers, in order to weather out the winter. And seasonally, that's what you do anyway. And then you wait for spring, and it's just really a wait and see. And it's really important to watch these numbers for us on a daily basis. But for our followers, if they're following on a weekly basis, we'll get a strong picture over the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's important to, as you say, to watch what's going on. But there's a few indicators I think I just want to highlight, and some of you will have seen this, but I just want to play it again. Right, 1.99% mortgage rate, typical 30-year mortgage per $100,000 is $365 a month. Right, this is based on the CBA calculator. If you go up to 3%, that's a 15.6% increase in the monthly repayments per 100,000. It's $422. If you go up to 4%, so that's double, it's a 31% increase in the monthly repayments, and your repayments now are $478 per month per 100,000. Now, that's shocking, right? A 31% increase in the monthly mortgage repayment for a 30-year mortgage shows you just how sensitive people are to what's going to happen if rates go up. And people are talking at least 2%. And interestingly, the ASX 30-day interbank rate, which is the one that sort of gives a forward indication, is now nearly 4%. Once you get over to the middle of next year, they're basically saying 3.9%. So the market is pricing in not just 2%, but nearly 4%. This is remarkable. So I'm not sure whether the market is right or not, but even 2% from where we are now, that would put a lot of people into great difficulty. And that's one of the reasons, going back to what your point, Edwin, about the underwriting. The banks are really twitchy, because if those rates are anything like right, people aren't going to... The 3% buffers won't solve this, right? This is a much bigger problem than 3% buffers. And then the other point, somebody asked a little while ago about what do I think about the Westpac case and the Wagger and Shiraz thing, because basically the judge said, well, of course, if people can't afford to buy Wagger and Shiraz, they'll buy something else. They'll buy cheaper things, right? Because they'll struggle to pay the mortgage, but they'll go on paying the mortgage. And there is some truth in that to an extent, but my surveys are showing that at some point, the choices that people have to make are really, really horrendous choices. So, for example, in my surveys now, I'm already seeing people who are not getting dental treatment that they need because they can't afford to get dental treatment, buy the food that they need, and pay the mortgage. We're already, for some people, in that domain. And I know that people say, well, there's tons of buffers out there. Sure, a lot of people do have buffers, but not everybody have buffers. And you know, the point I want to make is there are a proportion of people who are very close to the edge now, and this is before those next rate increases are coming. So I think we are in a very, very, very sticky situation. I think my own view is that the rates will definitely be 2 or 3%. And they could be higher than that. And if inflation is as embedded as I think it probably is, we could be even higher than that. And this is you know, really, really tricky. It really does change the game. And I don't know what you think, Edwin, but if we do get interest rates of 4, 5, 6%, that's really going to put a real dent in property prices.
Well, look, it will. But then we've got the other side of that coin without trying to be, you know, bullish or just trying to be realistic. And that is the other side of the coin is who then can afford to buy unless you're really cashed up, unless you've got a very low, very high deposit and you're coming in with a very low LVR. Banks are not going to really look at you as attractive as they may have been looking at you in the past. So the bigger question is how far is the current government going to allow this to play out before they start putting in those, throwing in those cushions or those mattresses to cushion the falls? Do they have any control? The other thing is that we don't have. So you sell the property, then where do you go? In the rental space, you some areas. In my area in the mountains, you've got the vacancy rate is 0.2%. Some areas are in the low ones. In other parts of Sydney, in the low ones. One of our followers was telling me that he went. Greg, his name's Greg. He was telling me that he went to an open house. 6 weeks ago. And there was something like 17 families or groups of people there representing families looking at a house. And people were just, it was a bidding war. And that's what's playing out in a lot of areas. I've shared on our Monday night rants, I've shared the stuff that Parapower has put up on Twitter, and we looked into that a little bit in depth, and we saw the shenanigans, the crap the agents are getting into and leasing out as livable accommodation, literally cubby houses or makeshift granny flats. When I say makeshift granny flats, it's just garages converted into so-called granny flats, and you've got this group of people that they've got nowhere else to go. So this is fundamentally the governments over the last 2 decades have really put us into a conundrum and put us, us as the people that unfortunately, we pay their dues, put us in a great big mess. And these are the local people. So I guess the way I look at it, what I say to people is, look, for property prices to bounce back up, even if there was another 50 basis point hike before the end of the year, or even let's call it 100 basis points, what it's doing, it's basically it might be putting a lot of pressure on the locals, to come in if they've got a low deposit. So the only ones that are going to be coming in to buy are going to be ones that have been sitting on the sideline, cashed up, and got a lot of money, and they can literally almost buy in cash. But my fear is for the locals is that because of what's happening in the greater world of economics, around us, my fear for the local people is that that immigration lever is going to be pulled, and not just it'll be for skilled labour. It'll be for high net worth individuals, but this is going to be playing out for the next 3 to 6 months before we really see a big push. And if that happens, things are going to change again. The sands are going to change again because, again, I say over and over again, I don't look at all of the market, all the Australian market, but I just look at the Sydney market and the dynamics that are at play in the Sydney market, and there will be areas where potentially they could bounce back above the peaks of 2021 if those immigration levers, particularly allowing high net worth individuals from Asian countries come in, and we could see something. Why? Because we're a small market, and there's this. Now again, I guess I've got to differentiate my conversation here, or my thought here is I'm talking about specifically about freestanding homes, not as much as apartments, because that's another argument, another talk, another discussion. But when it comes back to property values, Martin, when it comes back to, as I say to our clients and as I say to friends and family, is we really have to even look granular. In some cases, we've seen properties that you would in the same suburb. That vendors' motivation has been very, very high, but property needs a bit of TLC, and you've seen other sales in the same areas. So and they've achieved a low sale price, and then you've seen sales in the same areas where they've broken records. Why? Because it's a different type of property. It's a different type of we say it's a different appetite. It's a different level. You can't just put prices on suburbs as what we may have been able to do 8-10 years ago in general terms. Now we're looking at specific properties, who they really marketed to. What do they benefit? Is it close to what sort of amenities, schooling, which are all the decisions that both property owners and tenants or renters are the decisions that they're making based on the infrastructure and on the amenities that are around the places that they want to reside in.
Yeah, absolutely, Edwin. Well, a very important point there. Look, I'm convinced that the migration thing will happen. There's a big debate about how many people will migrate here, because everybody else is doing the same. I mean, New Zealand's already opened the migration gates there, and they're actually offering citizenship and fast track programs into New Zealand for certain types of people to try and pull people into New Zealand. Other countries are doing the same as well.
Yeah, but okay. Looking at let's look at it from this point of view. What have New Zealand got to offer apart from sheep farming and playing footy?
Oh.
Yeah, and if you wanna rub shoulders with the with the PM.
Rational Kiwi, it's your chance to put something in the chat there about why New Zealand. But the point is that a lot of other countries are doing it. Let me just recognise Tony Lacantro. Thanks for the super chat, Tony. And his comment was the 4 S's for happiness: sport, steak, even cheaper cuts, Shiraz, and sex. There you go. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Great thought of yours. You're going to be on in a few weeks, I know, so I look forward to your next live show.
Tony, we're in a world of caca at the moment, because even the you mentioned sex in there. I was at King's Cross visiting a lawyer, Martin, and it was dead. So if the nightclub or the clubs there, if King's Cross is dead, the economy's got to be really shot. And so we're in a mess.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody today who was trying to reignite his business in the CBD in Sydney, and has given up because basically he couldn't get enough people through the door to be able to cover the costs of opening and staff, right? And I'm hearing that quite often now in businesses, and that's I think the real sleeper here is the SME sector. I do think that there are going to be some real issues. Now, let me just finish my stress story. This is the sensitivity modelling that I do. So if rates go up, these are the extra people who are likely to fall into stress. So you can see there 0.5%, about 150,000, another 178,000 at 1% higher, another 200,000 at 1.5%, another 219,000 at 2%. So basically, if we go up another 2%, you can see there that we've got really close to 500,000 additional households that would fall into mortgage stress. This is a very, very significant factor that needs to be thought about. And I'm not sure a lot of people are understanding just how many people are close to the edge at the moment. And, you know, people are saying on one side, well, their rates might have to go up, but there are consequences. And, you know, some of the point about the consequences are it's actually a lot of ordinary people who ultimately end up, frankly, getting hit with this. And sometimes my view is that, the central bankers sit in their ivory towers and sort of pull levers and sort of think as though they've got this magic control mechanism. And I would argue that sometimes the control mechanism is nowhere near as strong. And the fact of the matter is that quite often what they think they can do, they can't do. And of course, I think it's very important to understand and just reiterate again, we are a small open market economy in the context of a series of global economies, including, of course, the US economy and China. And what happens over there is going to have a huge impact on what happens here. And the concept that we in some way can magically steer our own path or we're going to be different, my view is that's complete red herring, because essentially what happens over there is going to impact what happens over here. So in other words, if the Fed really drives interest rates a lot higher, that's going to have a major impact. If China catches a cold, we're going to actually really know about it. So to try and position ourselves as suspended in isolation, that we can do everything we want just without worrying about everything else, I think is probably not actually adequately thought through. The other point, of course, is that we know that there are some other negative factors. You know, we've got the Ukraine situation, we've got the supply chain issues and those disruptions, and disruptions in supply chains are not directly impacted by raising interest rates. So that's one reason why I've had the view for some time that raising interest rates is going to hit households. Surely it's going to hit small businesses, but it may not actually address the fundamentals of inflation. So we may find inflation is still going to be higher ahead, in which case you've got to ask the question, well, so tell me again, why we put rates back up? We'll discuss that later, I think, 2 or 3 years later, I think. But I'm not convinced there's some that we're going to see inflation suddenly going back down. And, you know, the quote I made earlier on was that RBA is saying 2 to 3% next year. Well, we'll see. It takes 18 months or so for the monetary policy to flow through. Maybe it's the year after. Maybe it's later than that. But I think we're going to have a lot of issues ahead, personally. But maybe I'm just too negative, Edwin, but that's what I'm thinking.
Look, I don't think so, mate. I think the Australian families as such, we're in a lot of strife. And I say families more so than the individuals, because with families, you've got, obviously, you've got children and you've got you've got to think about other costs, added costs, which is education, private education, or if you want to get into the top tier public schools, the areas come in high demand, and the entry level for properties, whether it be homes or older, bigger apartments, medium density strata blocks, they come at a price as well. So people are, like you said, they're really assessing. So I think there was a lot of pressure already before the pandemic, before this whole, before 2020, and we were already starting to feel that, back in 2019, when the economy was winding down. In a lot of cases, particularly for the big businesses, the pandemic was a lifesaver. It was definitely a lifesaver for my industry. Based on the stress that I was already seeing before that, because the way that commissions or the incomes flow weren't as generous as what they were in 2018, 2017. Everything was really winding down. So these stress levels that families are going through, I think fundamentally they've been rising even without the interest rate rises that have just creeping up because of other costs. What I've been thinking about, all we need right now is something to start happening in South America, in terms of, because there's a lot of economic uncertainty there with Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela is just a bastard case. But there are a lot of other countries. They're in a lot of Argentina. So it's in my view, just talking to my family that are there, talking to my family here, obviously being from that part of the world, it's almost like it's something is going to erupt there, and if something happens there, it's again going to impact things globally. There's going to be more issues. So look, I think that our current government are just between a rock and a hard place right now, and what's their alternative, Martin? What really is the alternative other than printing a shitload of money?
Yeah.
Throwing it at stimulus to try and they've got to try and buffer this before it picks up momentum, because a truck, you can slow a truck down, you can stop a truck whilst it's just the brakes are taken off, but once it picks up momentum, it's a force to be reckoned with, and there'll be nothing stopping it.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mortgage Keeper or some such program to allow people to flex their mortgage repayments again like they did through COVID. I wouldn't be surprised also to see some sort of excess profit tax on the oil industry like they've done in the UK, right? Because that's another way of generating some revenue back into the economy and helping people with the cost of living. Because cost of living, it can come through in my survey. Cost of living is the real big issue here, and rising interest rates is just part of the story. A lot of people are struggling with multiple facets at the same time, all going the wrong direction. So the question is, to what extent will governments try to help or not, or will they just say, well, it's market forces, and we can't do anything about it. We've just got the people have just got to put up with the pain. That, of course, is the big unknown question. And interestingly, of course, through COVID, the government threw vast quantities of money at businesses who never needed it in the first place, and spent a mozza on programs that never needed to have been spent in the first place. So there would have been enough money in the kitty to provide more support than we've currently got, because, of course, we've got this $1 trillion of debt pretty much sitting there already. So they've got limited runway, in my view, to help, but I wonder whether they will, and if they do, will it help, or will it actually just continue to perpetuate the old problem? And by the way, there is still the argument to say, well, they put rates up, then they put rates down again, and then they go negative to try and actually reduce the cost of debt, and negative interest rates still could be on the agenda later. I mean, it's unknown, but at the moment rates are definitely on the way up. And just to emphasise that, this is the 2-year yield curve, which basically jumped up again. So we're now back up close to 3% on the 2-year yield curve, which is pretty much as high as it's been, for a long, long time. And our stock market, of course, did come down a bit today, about 1% and a bit on the back of the news. So it's actually having an impact more broadly as well in terms of actually the other economic parameters. Now, very important question I've got for you, Edwin. This is from Stripey Cat. Whoops. Need to put just let me get the question up rather than Otto's question, which I put up. Here we go. How is Dusty and where is Evan? Says Stripey Cat, and thanks for the super chat. Very important question.
Look, it is important. I think they're out feeding the rooster. And if they are out feeding the rooster, they must have blown away. No, they're warm and cozy in the little cubby houses. When we get deliveries from in boxes, that becomes their little cubby houses. That becomes their toys. So they'll be around. They'll be around. They've they're okay. Enjoying. I'm not taking them out. I usually take them out for a bit of a round around the place, and take them out to visit the rooster from time to time. But they're it's just been too windy, and as soon as they step out from the studio, they onto the onto the steps to go into the pathway, they sort of run back into the studio. But they're okay. They're healthy, which is the main thing.
All right, let me just briefly talk about my scenarios, because I want to talk about some specific examples of properties, which and we can talk about those. But just to say, this is the current range scenario. RBA is still looking at a 2.5% rate over, let's say, 2 years out from where we are. Low unemployment rate, mortgage rates around 5.5%. I think that translates to reasonably high mortgage stress at 44%, and home prices probably more down than up. Oh, there's a pussycat. Hang on. Which pussycat's that?
This one's Evan.
Okay.
She heard us talking about it, so she just came over.
Very good. Hello, Evan.
She's very sleepy. She just woke up.
Exactly. There you go. Must have heard something. There you go. Very good. I'm afraid my two dogs are still completely out of it. There you go. They're sort of just sound asleep, so I'm afraid that we don't get much change from them at the moment. Okay, back to the scenario. So I've got three scenarios. My best case scenario, which is essentially rate doesn't go up, or goes up, comes back, and as a result of that, the unemployment rate's a bit higher. The mortgage stress is slightly higher, but there is a little bit of incentivization in Term Funding Facility version 2, and as a result of that, there's a little upside as well as some downside. And then there are two other scenarios which are more negative, my sort of mid-case and my worst-case scenario. And those are important because it does actually have a profound impact on the way that prices trajectorily travel. And so, just to give you a bit of a flavour of how that works, this is my postcode tool, right, which basically allows me to put information in for a particular postcode, and I get a whole bunch of stress information, and also I get some trajectorial information based on those three scenarios for both houses and units, with the best case, the blue, the base case, and the mid case, the orange, and the worst case, the sort of the grey colour. And you can see there that I can actually produce that for any postcode. And if you want to subscribe to that, you go to Patreon and you can get that information. I also have investment information as well, which is quite interesting, looking at the gross investment returns and the net investment returns. So for this particular postcode, which happens to be 2250, it's in the Central Coast around West Gosford, the net investment returns are close to zero. And that's one of the really interesting observations that we're seeing when it comes to a lot of investment properties. A lot of investment properties are still underwater. Now, the reason I've mentioned this is because Cookie Boy was very kind and pulled out some very interesting case studies for us to look at. And Edwin, I thought we might chat about some of these now. And this is the first one. So this is actually in that same postcode in West Gosford. And so new to market at the end of 2021, the guide price was 2.9 million. Then it went to 2.7. Then it went to 2.5 to 2.7. Then it was a guide of 2.1, and now it's at 1.9. That's quite an interesting move in terms of going down over that period of time. And in terms of just looking at it from a stress perspective, there is some mortgage stress, but there's more rental stress in that particular postcode. There's also some financial stress overall there. So, you could argue maybe that there's actually a need to sell rather than a want to sell. And investment returns, as I said, are pretty low. And here are the scenarios. So the best case is maybe a slight rise over 3 years if things go perfectly. But more likely, the downside scenarios are going to come into play. So there's more capital losses probably ahead from where we currently are. Now, I don't know whether you've got any observations on that sort of quantum of move, but that seems quite a big move to me.
Look, it is just, I was trying to be computer literate for whilst you were talking, but obviously I'm not. I was trying to play around. I was just going to do a quick RP data search on that property because it looked to me like it was land to be subdivided from what I saw.
It could well be, and that could be part of the reason why there's a change. But it is an interesting, and it shows you the point, Edwin. You've got to get really granular to really understand what's going on, right?
Definitely, and this is something that I've been saying on Twitter as well, and in a lot of posts that get put up there. And that is, I've been saying you just got to be careful. You've just got to be careful, and some of the conversations around these. Look, there's going to be a lot of out-of-line sales. I'm saying there's going to be opportunities because you don't know what the motivation of the vendor, and it's up to you as a buyer if you really want to go into to find out what the motivation of the vendor is to determine as to how cheaply you can walk away with it, or how much blood the owner or the agent want to hemorrhage. But you just need to find out the motivation. So there's a lot of factors at play. So, but we have to really look at these properties individually. When you see those big ranges at the moment across the board, 9 out of 10, Martin, are really either because they're development sites or they've got a development potential, and the development appetite is quickly dissipating. It's quickly going away, going off the market. They're pulling. It's getting very, very, very cold because not only because prices have been very high, but because cost of construction is become super high, where we could build a new dwelling for 1,800 to 2,000 a square metre. Now you're paying anywhere upwards of 2,800 to 3,000 a square metre. Where electricians, they're telling me that the increase in materials have gone up by 80% over the last 6 to 8 months. So you've got all these factors coming in. So this is where these landowners or these subdivision proposals, yes, they're going to come back. They're going to come back to reality, because one of the things, Martin, that I've shared before is that although cost of construction is going up, or property prices, maybe falling. But when you're dealing with new subdivisions, when you're dealing with new developments, one of the things that seems to increase and that doesn't seem to be in favour of developers or builders is the added cost by way of levies, by duties, and in other words, government fees from the local government, right up to the GST on the sale, and it's criminal. It is absolutely criminal. So when you look at those things, the one that Cookie Boy showed there, the land value is going down, depending on how many lots you could get on there. So you could say that the land values, the expectation on the land values have dropped dramatically. But one of the things is the council contributions for that area. I know that they're around 95,000 per lot, because I was involved in a subdivision a year ago, proposed subdivision there, and it was around 95,000 to just put a stamp on a bloody piece of paper per lot. So if you got 8 blocks out of the 4,000 square metre parcel of land that we were trying to offload, if you got 8 lots or 10 lots, it's 95,000 per lot. So that's how much the council is making by just stamping 8 or 10 pieces of paper. How do you like them apples?
Yeah, that's just crazy, absolutely. And I've got quite a lot of evidence from other sources as well as to the horrendous costs that are incurred, and guess where the money goes? A lot of it goes to the council, and of course the council wants to keep that flowing in because they've got to try and cover their costs, and on it goes, right? So it's a real conundrum. Cookie Boy suggested this is a sort of a rural setting, and so it might be agricultural land. We don't have enough details to go further, but that quantum of movement was pretty stunning. Here's another one which I'll just put up, which is this is an apartment over in Fremantle, postcode 6159, and it was on at 7.5 million, and now it's down at 7 million. So there's a 500,000 drop from September last year to now. And it's interesting there because that particular postcode has mortgage stress of around 50%, and the rental stress is pretty low. Some property investors also struggling a little bit. And interestingly, WA, best case, there is still an upside to houses in this particular postcode, and indeed units too, but that's the best case scenario. Otherwise, there's a bit of a slide or a more severe slide, so you can see some of the conundrums there. And it's interesting that, obviously this is an apartment. It's got, 4 beds, 3 bathrooms and 4 car spaces. That's a, obviously big and quite sophisticated place at that price. But it is interesting because quite often, Edwin, it's the top end that goes first, isn't it, when it comes to property prices? The more expensive properties tend to ease back ahead of perhaps some less expensive ones.
Look, yes, and you can see the changes in values. They look more dramatic. They look more, and that's why the mainstream media also picked the ones the ones that achieve the high prices, and until you start breaking those open, when they're beating the chest, what a wonderful, how much prices are going up, or even in some homes that are breaking records, regardless of what the rates, the market sentiment is. You look at us, we're breaking records. But when you drill down and you look at it on its own, and as you say, granular, you find out that it's a development site. Yeah. But these sort of examples are really coming home to roost, like the one that I shared in Thornley, 2.8 asking, and it sold for what was 1.725. When our client, we had an offer in there earlier in the year at 2.2. As much as I thought he was only worth around 2 million even at that time, but some people like it. Some people, it comes back to the motivation of the vendor and also the motivation of the buyer. So once you start putting it all together, once you start dealing with all the pieces of the puzzle, you can say you either choose to, as I say, pay over the odds, or you can walk away with an upside that you can then mitigate if there are future economic downturns or hiccups or other grenades thrown at the economy. You can buffer your potential losses in a way that because you're standing. So when you're looking at property, you got to look at the unique proposition that he's offering you. And in some cases, people will still pay. There are cases now and in the future, people will pay exorbitant amounts of money. What you and I may think is a ridiculous amount, but at the end of the day, they've got the money. Who knows how they got the money, but they've got the money and they like the property. They love it. They don't need to do anything, and it's an emotional purchase, and that emotion is worth a lot to them. Yep. Likewise, a view is worth a lot to a lot of people, and so forth. So it's that fundamental, as you say, on one hand, fundamentally looking at the proposition in front of you, looking at the market, the property in front of you, under a microscope, granular, and as I say, looking at it from whether or not you're going to as a buyer, what is the upside? What is the unique proposition? How can you add value? Is the value add because you bought something that you came across a vendor that was that desperate to sell that they were willing to walk away with a bloody nose? Is that your value add? Because that could be a value add in itself as well. Or is your value add the fact that you could remodel the home internally without doing too much major works to the property, or give it a quick spruce over and you've uplifted the value? So these are all the things that you've got to look at properties individually. But we're going to get a lot of out-of-line sales that are going to pull both ways, and it's going to scare the bejeebies out of vendors, and is also going to make us, our jaws are going to drop as to prices that people are going to be paying for what we would consider silly money, given the circumstances. But once you look at property individually in detail, it paints more of a real picture.
No, very good point. And there was a very good question earlier on from Adana, who said, has there been any studies on rental stress, looking at the impact of additional costs like moving, storage, cleaning, etc.? Yeah, in my analysis of rental stress, I've got some of that data factored in because it's very important as part of the overall story when it comes to rent. There's a lot of moving around amongst renters at the moment. A lot of people are being forced to move because they can't afford the rent and trying to find somewhere cheaper, or the particular property has been on long-term rent, but now they're moving it back to Airbnb, and so people get shuffled and moved on. So I try to capture some of that, but I don't think there's any strategic study that I've seen anywhere else that really looks at this in detail. And I think it's a very important question because, again, it seems to me that the rental sector of the market is hardly being discussed anywhere in the mainstream media at the moment. I made a show a couple of weeks ago with Megan Wells talking about specifically the rental sector because I feel very strongly that this is something which is underrepresented in terms of analysis, underrepresented in terms of comment on the mainstream. And when I get the chance, when I do my media commitments, I try to make sure that I cover off some of those rental issues because you're raising some very, very important points. So thanks for that. Now, Edwin, there's just one more which is quite interesting. Central Coast is an interesting area, right? Somebody, I think it was Cookie Boy a little while ago, said that some people are moving away from the Central Coast because of the very, very high rates and things up there. And certainly we're seeing a lot of issues with regard to rental stress and mortgage stress up in the Central Coast. It's one of the real hotspots in and around Sydney. But this is one that was at 2 million guided 26th of April 2022. It's now 1.8 to 1.9. So again, another example of a property that's slid in value. And again, I highlight the fact that the stress data suggests more than 41% of households have a mortgage problem. 60% of renters have an issue in that particular postcode. And we also know that there isn't much upside from this point. So even in my modelling, only on the best case is there any positivity over the next 3 years. Other than that, prices are likely to go to the downside. So not a huge amount of incentive potentially for thinking about the long-term value creation. So I suspect that's part of the reason why some of these prices are actually easing back a bit.
Yeah, look, and what you're going to get is you're going to also there's now that push for corporations or bigger employers to get the workforce back into the office. And a lot of the people that moved out of Sydney or further away because of the leniency of working from home. Now, of late, we've seen articles of the fact that, as you and I said, once you start allowing people to work from home, once corporations are going to find out that they can, people that they can do the work remotely, well, it's not going to be a matter. It's only going to be a short matter of time before these corporations are also going to find out that, hey, if they could do it remotely here in Australia, why can't I get the same work done by cheaper labour overseas? The only thing, obviously, that countered that was security risks or issues. But if you can find a way to protect yourself with that, well, then it's a no-brainer. You're going to look for that cheaper labour being done overseas. So we've got those factors. Yes, he does make a very good point. Regional areas in terms of council rates are horrendously high. Then you've got the pulling back of the I guess. Without let me think, because people feel a little bit safer to come back to the more populated areas because they're being vaxxed and they've had the boosters and everything else, so they feel more at ease. So they feel that they want to come back, and the regional areas, they find out that it's not really for them. They don't have the facilities. You and I have talked about the lag in infrastructure. Even in subdivisions closer to the on the outskirts of Sydney, let alone going further afield. So these are these are the fundamental changes and that people aren't coping with, and they want to make a return back to Sydney. But Cookie Boy will appreciate this. Is that I am seeing those similar price guides in the Blacktown LGA of your Kellyvilles, your Kellyville Ridges, and all that, and you'll actually see in some cases properties being sold below the lower guide. Because we get, although you don't see the sale prices on that, either we have an associate or somebody fronting up to an auction, whether or not we're assisting a client. There's people around that we get information from, and they tell us. And what we've noted over the last 3 weeks is a lot of property is being sold below the bottom end of the guide. So for me, for the last two downturns, the previous two downturns in the property market, the Blacktown LGA has been my canary in the coal mine because of the diversity of the demographics there, and also the diversity of builds and construction. You've got your new subdivisions, you've got your $3 million subdivisions and homes. You've got your fibro old fibro housing commission. You've got your suburbs that were considered ghettos and the no-go zone for many years, and so you've got this broad spectrum of construction, of diversity of ethnicity of people, and yet it's centered in this Blacktown LGA, which forms a micro market that more or less is my indicator to the rest of what's going to happen in the rest of Sydney. It's an interesting LGA, and I'm sure Cookie Boy will enjoy it, and I'm sure he's also following up some of those because he's a local from the Blacktown LGA, so he'll be following some of those posts around Kellyville and Kellyville Ridge.
Well, it's just certainly interesting, and some of the analysis I've done over in Western Sydney is highlighting some of those very same issues. Now, here's an interesting question from Andrew. With a large deposit and good income, what loan-to-value ratio is smart for a first home buyer given the current market, 20, 50, 70? Any macro books you recommend? Look, my own perspective, and this isn't financial advice, but if you can get below the 80%, then you avoid the lender's mortgage insurance and all that shenanigans, and you can normally get a better rate. If you get down to 70%, then you can probably get a better rate still, and of course that gives you more of a buffer. But one of the things to think about is if you're buying, are you buying for the long term? If you're buying for the long term, actually, and you're prepared potentially to lose a little bit of value through the cycle, it's not a problem. The problem is if you actually are buying at a very high loan-to-value ratio, say 5%, and you intend only to hold it for a couple of years, that's the risky scenario. And if you have to use lender's mortgage insurance, so you have to pay the premium as well, that's another $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on top. And so you're out of pocket before you've started, and then you have to pay the exit fees as well. And so if you do the math, then you never make money on it. So long-term investment, keep a buffer and keep below the 80 is what I would think. Anything to add, Edwin?
I don't know. Did he give a price range? Because I didn't read the screen. I didn't read the question. Was there a price range? Because first home buyers is the terminology first home buyer is, some first home buyers are coming in at 1.5 to 2 million.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Depends on the.
Also, to me, depends on obviously on the price point. And if he's a first home buyer, obviously, and if he's looking at, or the person's looking at coming in, you've got to have those buffers. But again, it goes back. I know, say it over and over again, and I know with the people, and you've also got to negotiate on your terms. And there's a hell of a lot more property in it's monitoring the market, because if you're negotiating on your terms, coming in at your terms, knowing that you do have an upside and buffer, buffer a potential 10% drop. So in other words, you're literally buying it as though the property was already 10% below value, in future. So you're buffering that by that unique proposition that you can see in the property that others don't see or walk away from. Or they're too scared to handle. Obviously, be very careful and very cautious with regards to trying to get a deal because it's got major structural issues, because it could also could bite you in the backside, thinking that you can get away with rectifying issues on the cheap, and they end up costing you a hell of a lot more in this market. So yeah, as long as you can you buffer that, as long as you can buy with that upside. And you'll and as you said, Martin, at the end of the day, it also comes back to what's your midterm goal as well as your long-term goal, and if you don't think of it as an investment, then obviously it's a different you're taking a different approach to what you would into trying to be somewhere for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, because this thing, who knows what's going to happen. Things change so rapidly month to month, let alone trying to in this day and age, and with everything that's happening globally and around us, trying to navigate month by month is somewhat difficult and precarious, let alone trying to predict what's going to happen in a year's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another one here from Yogi Bear. Maybe we should stop get the journalists to stop asking the pollies about the price of milk and ask them about the price of 2 kilogram Gyproc from Bunnings. That's a good one. Absolutely. Well, that's a real important point.
Well, during the campaign, I was trying to get the journalists to ask ScoMo and Albo what the auction clearance rates were. Nobody was listening to me much. That should have been the great indicator, but none of the journals were asking those questions. But then, in all seriousness, how many journals really pressed them on housing affordability? How many journals really pressed both sides on the issues of rental affordability and the lack of good affordable housing, both from a rental perspective as well as from a purchase. Yep. Fundamentally, we got all these 40% JV ventures with the government. Everything was being thrown us to the point of 1 million homes. Quite looking at it now retrospectively, the 1 million homes look a lot more attractive than the 40% LVR, because and in particular, if those homes, a large portion of whatever homes the government would build, if they got the balls and the fortitude to build, that would build to accommodate the families that are in that financial position, and that stressful position when they're trying to bring up young families.
Absolutely. Now, somebody I think may have posted a super chat, and I missed the question and it's disappeared. So can you re-ask the question, and I'll try and make sure that I answer it. My apologies there. We've got so many things going on in the chat, and I had to knock out a few nasties as well. It's on the way through. So apologies if I missed one, but if you ask it again, I'll make quite sure that that we do answer it before we sign off. It's 9:24, so we've got just a few minutes left, Edwin. There's a bunch of questions that people are asking about what happens, for example, if the US moves rates to 6%. The answer is, if rates go up strongly in the US, we'll almost certainly have to follow suit to an extent, partly because of the exchange rate issue that we've got with the US, and the US, of course, being the predominantly strong currency at the moment. Not sure precisely whether the Fed is likely to get that high. The markets are there at the moment, not necessarily going to 6%. They're looking at a lower number than that. And somebody else also asked in the chat, where are we vis-a-vis the inflationary cycle compared with other countries? We're a bit behind. I think there's more inflation building than we are seeing at the moment, but that's partly because of the way that we measure inflation here, and partly because the inflation is not reported very frequently. So I think we're probably sort of 6 months behind. The New Zealand situation is very interesting. They started lifting rates last November. They're at 2% at the moment, and they're still seeing inflation, going forward. They've seen prices fall considerably. They've seen credit growth ease back, and a bunch of other things too. So I think we're behind the ball a bit. But I think inflation will probably run for quite a lot longer than people think, and that's part of the challenge at the moment for the Reserve Bank. But the other question, of course, as we discussed earlier, is at what point do they actually say, well, do we have to allow inflation to be a bit higher because we've got these other issues too? That's really one of their key conundrums. But at the moment, they've actually committed to trying to deal with inflation, and the 50 basis point was a sort of a shock and awe move on their part, sort of demonstrating we're bigger than normal. This is important, and we're focusing on it. So that's how I see it at the moment. Now, in terms of other questions, let me just see whether I can find this question that. Let's have a look.
Okay,
yeah.
Can I just say?
Hang on. Let me just. I think this is the question. Debt and Regret asked this question: how many buyers has Edwin dealt with that have been heavily borrowed to buy compared to bigger deposits? So, do you find a lot of people basically leveraged up, or do they leverage less?
If they don't have, I try to talk them out of buying. That's me personally. My associates take a different position, but my personal clients, I really have a long chat with them, and I sit down with them, and I try and talk them out of buying. Let me rephrase. Buying in the areas that they want to buy when they're coming in with very low LVRs. Because I've known over the years, good times and bad times. It's a recipe for disaster. You've got to make and I say to them, if they've got a very, very high LVR, I say you've got to make a sacrifice. You've got to be prepared to make a sacrifice. It's either a change in the area, going further afield, not necessarily looking for a 4-bedroom, starting up with a 3-bedroom, or if you're looking for a 3-bedroom, starting up with a 2-bedroom home, if you're looking for a bigger block, all these things. You've got to be making the sacrifices. Don't play the game. Don't get caught up in this tide that's just going to be washed into the ocean, and you're just going to be another statistic. So from that, the percentages that have proceeded on that are very, very low. I would say probably 5%. If that, honestly, Martin, I prefer not to take on the business. It impacts me. But look, having said that, I've got a couple of people in mind, and they're probably watching. I've guided them to RentVest, as opposed to RentVest further afield, where they could at least get a start. Because the other tendency is if they hadn't started the property journey to help them through transition from an investment to then into a principal place of residence. If they hadn't started, I know, talking to the parents, talking to the greater family, and talking to them, I know that they would have spent it, or they would have put it in. They would have gone full, hell for leather on shares or any other investment that's they would have done, lost it all over the last 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people can lose their shirts if they're not careful. I agree on that, particularly now. So I think a little caution is good. Now, there's a bunch of questions just come in as we close. What's the similarity between the current Australian and Canadian situation? Well, Canada's been moving their rates faster. We've both got the same money laundering problems as Canada and Australia. We've both got very high price growth now coming back. So there are some very significant parallels, I think, between Canada and Australia. I've done a few shows with people over in Canada, and we've compared notes, and it does seem as though we're heading the same way. Vincent makes a very important point, and that's the government doesn't mind inflation because it's a higher GST intake. Well, I'll turn that around. If they really wanted to deal with the cost of living pressures, what they should do is reduce the GST, because that will be a way of essentially making it easier for people to buy things and keep buying. So maybe there's a lever there that people haven't thought about yet, to reduce the GST for a period of time to get people through. Because I actually think we are in a relatively emergency situation here, and I don't feel that people are actually necessarily responding appropriately. There are many people doing it really, really tough at the moment. I see that in my survey, and unfortunately, I feel that quite a few people are very much, not quite seeing it strongly enough. Striping.
But what about stamp duty, Martin? What about stamp duty? If prices go down, less stamp duty.
Yeah.
If transaction volumes go down, less stamp duty.
Yep.
And stamp duty plays a significant part in the government coffers. So it's that's another another ball into the mix.
No, that's a very good point. And of course, the point is we've actually benefited from that massive rise up in value. New South Wales stamp duty went through the roof over the last period. It's now going the other way. So that's really important. Stripey Cap, thank you very much for your super chat, and glad you enjoyed the show. Edwin, any last thoughts before we close the show? Any last piece of advice, or
Musconomics. Follow Musconomics. You need to be on the ball with Musconomics, and he's also been following us, Martin, because he's talking about the last generation movement in China in these last couple of tweets. So, pay very close attention to what Musconomics has said. That's Elon Musk. For those that don't unaware what I'm talking about, we spoke about that yesterday in our rant. It's interesting what he's saying. So, look, I just thought I'd throw that in.
No, thank you, Edwin. Well, I appreciate that. And look, my advice is this, I think. We've got to assume interest rates are going to go higher from this point. Therefore, it's important to try and understand your own financial position at the moment with cash flows and things, and start prioritising and start building buffers now, because interest rates are going to go up, and they are going to go up and stay up for some time. They may come down later. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people have bought recently have got very significant issues, but I also know that quite a few people don't necessarily have the best mortgages that they could get. So use those portals to go and seek better interest rates, because there are still good interest rates out there at the moment, and it's worth shopping around and getting those. And then the final point to make is that remember that, of course, banks have hardship schemes, and so if there is a real pressure on you, talk to your bank. They may have ways that can help. Just be careful, because they don't necessarily provide the best solution for you. They do the best solution for them. But nevertheless, it's actually pretty important to take this seriously. We are in a whole new ball game. The world has changed. Interest rates are going up. They're going to stay up. Property prices will probably continue to slide to some extent, as we've discussed. It varies. We're certainly not going to see anything like the same gains over the last 12 months. Rates are going to be higher. All of those things are going to play. And we are in a new game, and it's important to play that game by the new rules. So that's.
People need to start hedging the deposits, Martin.
Yep.
When I say hedging the deposits, as I say, as much as people may take this seriously, or we just around a little bit, but with regards to it, but you need to really pay attention if you're going to be buying, particularly at auction campaigns. Or under an auction campaign, just because it's an auction campaign does not mean that you cannot dictate the terms of your offer. Now, and I'll say this, the agents will try and force you, if you're making an offer pre-auction, they will try and force the 66, what they call the 66W, which is you're waiving your right of a cooling off period. Now, unfortunately, banks won't give you a formal bank valuation to give you a formal approval, which is different to an indicative approval. They won't give it to you unless a contract of sale is signed, and the contract of sale is signed by the vendor, not a contract of sale that's signed by yourself as a purchaser, which is wrong, which is criminal in my view. But so what you need to do is dictate your terms. and dig your heels in and ask for they'll push hard for that 66W for under auction conditions. Just tell them no. My offer is this, and I want a cooling off period so that a formal valuation can be done prior to, because otherwise the valuations are going to be. You watch this space. You're going to hear more and more people, doing their deposits or losing the deposits because a lot more valuations are not going to come in, and they're not going to have that buffer to make up the difference. But if you can negotiate that term, do so. Now, the other alternative is, wait post auction and buy it under a private treaty. Because more than likely, 2 out of 3 times, I'd say the properties are not going to transact on the day of the auction. They're going to be transacted post the auction, which then the selling agents have got no leg to stand on, and you can just come in with under a private treaty campaign, which warrants you the rights for a 5-day cooling off anyway.
Edwin, well, thank you very much. Great advice there, as always. Appreciate your coming on tonight, short notice, and sharing the conversation with me. Thank you very much. We'll go back to our normal mode of operation next Monday, I guess, for our Monday chat. And I really appreciate that. Keep warm, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, Martin. Anytime.
See ya. There you go, folks. That's pretty much done. Just to say that next week, Robbie Barwick is coming on, 14th of June. We're going to talk about post-election politics. What are the things that we should be campaigning around now? We'll talk about the cash ban. We'll talk about bail-in and bail-out and a few other things too. So that'll be worthwhile, and make a note of that. Make a note of that show. So I want to say thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. Appreciated all the questions. We didn't get to them all, but hopefully we got through some of them. And also, Cookie Boy, thanks very much for providing some great case studies. I'm going to make an extra show with some of the other case studies we didn't get through tonight. As always, way too much material for the time we had. But there you go. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care. Keep warm. We'll see you next time. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.